YouTube? It's the one and only Legend of Winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another video. So everyone's on lockdown, there really isn't any sports at all, so I decided why not give you all my top 10s lists for each position, and in between those videos bring back my evolution series, since there is a lot of people who consistently ask me about that series since it's been, a year from now since I've uploaded that video. So with that being said, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you can be updated when I upload these videos. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Coming at number 10, we have John Stockton. John Stockton is a 6'1" point guard.
Whoa, they put John Stockton as top 10. Oh my god. Oh yeah, I'm not gonna be good. Oh yeah, I'm not, bro. I want to quit this video right now. Top 10. Alright, guys.
Guard who spent almost all of his 2-decade career playing for the Utah Jazz. Within his 19-year career, he, alongside his teammate Karl Malone, popularized the offensive scheme, the pick and roll, to the point where in today's NBA, so many other point guards benefited immensely. Now, when it comes to Stockton, his biggest positive is his longevity and durability. Throughout his career, he only had 2 seasons where he did not play all available games, and with that level of durability, his
John Stockton career accomplishments. Career to the regular season. Dang. I think if he would have got a ring, that would have labeled him. It's one of the best. Well, that's his opinion. His opinion is stupid. Whatever you're gonna do, don't play 2K. Watch it.
Translated to over 1,500 regular season games and over 47,000 regular season minutes, which is just ridiculous. And that has led to a level of statistical dominance that has put Stockton at the top of the leaderboard when it comes to total assists and total steals by a fairly wide margin. Also in Stockton's career, he was a 10-time All-Star, an 11-time All-NBA performer, made the All-Defensive Team 5 times, led the NBA in assists 9 times, and led the NBA in steals twice. So why isn't Stockton any higher? Well, first has to do with the lack of postseason success, as even though, yes, the Utah Jazz were highly successful during the regular season, during the playoffs, they just couldn't get it done. And honestly, I don't really understand why when it comes to the lack of postseason success, when it comes to John Stockton and Karl Malone, people only discuss the 97 and 98 season, because if you were to expand the argument and look at their entire career together, John Stockton and Karl Malone have a losing record during the playoffs and have more first-round exits than conference finals appearance. And because of the lack of postseason success, it highlights a second problem with Stockton's career, in my opinion, and that is he was never given the responsibility to lead a team because he was privileged to play with Karl Malone for practically his entire career. And with the lack of success, as well as never really receiving any strong considerations to be an MVP throughout his time in the league, it's really hard for me to look at Stockton in any higher light, despite the outrageous numbers that really never translated to any major amount of winning. Coming in at number 9, we have Russell Westbrook. Now, within his 12 years in the NBA, Westbrook has displayed a level of athleticism that quite honestly has never been seen at the point guard position. And because of it, it has aided Westbrook to dominate the league and impact it in various ways, to the point where he has had 3 straight years of averaging a triple-double. Furthermore, despite Westbrook playing in the most talented era for point guards in NBA history, he is still highly accomplished. 9-time All-Star, 8 All-NBA selections, led the NBA in scoring twice, led the league in assists twice, and in 2017 he was named MVP. Now when it comes to the negatives, I don't really think there's that much of a surprise here. Westbrook is easily one of the least efficient volume scorers the NBA has offered in the past 40 years. When it comes to his amount of turnovers, it is ridiculous and completely unacceptable. And in his last 3 years in OKC, in an attempt to lead a franchise, he failed miserably in the first round. And quite honestly, it was fairly embarrassing when he lost to the Utah Jazz and the Portland Trail Blazers. Coming in at number 8, I have Jason Kidd. Kidd is a 6'4" point guard who spent 19 years in the NBA and was an astonishing passer and an elite level defender. Now, when it comes to Kidd, I believe the biggest positive in his career is that he provided the evidence that he was able to lead a team to the NBA Finals in the early 2000s with the New Jersey Nets, despite them really not having the talents to compete, even in a weaker Eastern Conference. Also, Jason Kidd was not only a phenomenal passer, but also a really good rebounder for his height and his position, which I think a lot of people should give him a bit more credit for, as he was able to impact the game in more ways than your stereotypical point guard would be able to. But in my opinion, the most overlooked factor in Jason Kidd's career is how versatile he was as a player. Jason Kidd was far from a one-trick pony and could be extremely impactful and successful in various different environments. If you wanted him to stand at the top of the key, run pick and rolls, he could do that. If you wanted a fast-paced offense, he could do that as well. If your team was more defensive-oriented, he also could do that. And if you needed him to be more of an off guard, he excelled in that aspect as well, which in my opinion is a huge reason why he won in 2011, thanks to his versatility. And at the end of his career, Jason Kidd finished as a 10-time All-Star, a 6-time All-NBA performer, making the All-Defensive Team 9 times, which is really impressive for a perimeter player, and also led the NBA in assists 5 different times. Now, when it comes to the negatives for Jason Kidd, he obviously struggled when it came down to scoring and shooting the basketball efficiently. So much so early on in his career, people just didn't respect his three-point shot whatsoever. And also, there are stretches in Jason Kidd's career where you have to question the lack of success. The most noteworthy ones being when Vince Carter joined the New Jersey Nets and they still weren't able to get over the hump and make it back to the NBA Finals, as the Eastern Conference got a bit.
Dip ain't gonna help you ride these waves. Bazillions.
Guys, let me know right now what y'all think about this video. To me, it's straight, but putting John Stockton as number 10, so you, I don't know, bro. I don't know.
Tougher. Coming in at number 7, we have Steve Nash, and I don't know why people thought I wasn't going to have Nash on this list. Nevertheless, Steve Nash, 6'3" point guard who spent majority of his career bouncing back and forth between the Dallas Mavericks and the Phoenix Suns. However, as we all know, most of his impactful years were playing with Phoenix in that 7 seconds or less offense, coached by D'Antoni during the mid-2000s. And to be fair to Steve Nash, that impact has clearly translated into today's NBA and with today's point guards. Nash was an amazing shooter and extremely efficient from the field, as he has 2 seasons of a 50-40-90 split, which rarely happens in NBA history. And you pair that with Nash's sensational passing abilities, and you easily have one of the greatest point guards in recent memory. By the end of his career, he was an 8-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA performer, 2-time MVP recipient, and led the NBA in assists 5 times. Now, when it comes to the negatives for Nash, there are 2 things that stand out the most. Defensively, he was a liability for a huge portion of his career. But more importantly, the one thing that I consistently harp on when it comes to Nash and his career is his inability to win a championship. Despite him playing alongside some all-time greats and very talented teammates, I still believe people underestimate how talented those Phoenix Suns teams were and how unacceptable it is for them to never have won a championship or even make an NBA Finals appearance. Next up, we have Chris Paul, and to be completely honest with you all, from Chris Paul to Russell Westbrook was extremely difficult for me. However, CP3, 6-foot point guard who has played for the Hornets, Clippers, Rockets, and now the Oklahoma City Thunder, has a very controversial career. When it comes to CP3 as an individual, he has everything that you would want out of a player, let alone a point guard. He's a great passer, very respectable assist numbers with a very low turnover rate. Furthermore, defensively is what really separates CP3 from a lot of players on this list. Also, when it comes to scoring, Chris Paul has the perfect mixture of scoring and passing, and he's extremely efficient in doing so. So he very, very rarely wastes any shot attempts whatsoever. And all of that.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was that 2017, no, 2018, no, I think it was 2017. That year, the Rockets versus the Warriors. Chris Paul, that's the first time I've ever seen Chris Paul really gave buckets to Steph. Like he was just throwing up shots, hitting them. I'm like, oh my god, I thought they was gonna beat him. But nah, I thought they was gonna beat him. Okay, for real. All right, let's get back to the video.
That is translated to a career where Chris Paul is a 10-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA performer, 9-time All-Defensive Teams, which is, again, very rare for a point guard to accomplish. Led the NBA in assists 4 times and led the NBA in steals 6 times. But of course, now with the negatives, and in my opinion, the biggest negative for Chris Paul in his career is his injuries. He's very injury prone, and he tends to get hurt in the worst times imaginable. I mean, there's been so many postseason runs where he should have gone further than he was supposed to, but the run was cut short due to an injury that he has sustained. And speaking of postseason runs, Chris Paul has only made it to the conference finals 1 time. Now, for a portion of his career, you can definitely make the argument that he wasn't on teams that were talented enough. However, when you look at his years with the Clippers, that becomes a bit more debatable, especially in 2015. And then when you look at his years in Houston, one of which he eventually did make it to the conference finals, that certainly isn't debatable whatsoever. But still, the lack of postseason success, regardless if you want to label him as a quote-unquote choker, which I won't, or attribute his lack of postseason success to his injuries, which I'm more so willing to do so, regardless, it's still there. Coming in at number 5, we have Oscar Robertson, and I'm not going to act like I've sat there and watched the Big O play during his time. However, I will be basing my opinion off of what I've read and what I've heard from other people who did witness him play. Oscar Robertson is a 6'5" point guard who spent majority of his 14-year career playing for the Cincinnati Royals and finished it playing for the Milwaukee Bucks. Robertson is famously known for being the first player in NBA history to average a triple-double back in 1962, and if you were to look at his first 5 years in the NBA, he was very close to doing it again, to the point where if you were to average out those first 5 years, it would give you an average of a 30-point triple-double. Furthermore, you can make an argument that in many ways the Big O was a pioneer when it comes to scoring guards and proving that they can be impactful in the league, as Bob Cousy and Oscar Robertson were the only guards in NBA history up until the late 80s with Magic Johnson to win an MVP in the NBA. Also, by the end of his career, he will be a 12-time All-Star, an 11-time All-NBA performer, and led the league in assists 6 different times. Now, there's only 2 negatives for Oscar Robertson, one of which he has no control over, and that is just the era that he played in. I can only imagine that it had to be significantly easier for him to receive individual accolades as a guard during the 60s. But more importantly, from what I've understood, the numbers that Oscar Robertson was putting up never really translated to any type of success, especially early on in his career. And some people will go as far as saying that his playing style was a detriment to his team's success, and that is evident when you realize that some of his years in Cincinnati finished with a losing record, and there are even some years where they didn't even make the playoffs. However, I believe a lot of people overlook that thanks to his impact as well as the championship that he eventually won playing alongside Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Coming in at number 4, we have Isaiah Thomas, which I feel like will be another controversial take, but bad boy Pistons Isaiah Thomas, the 6-foot guard who spent his entire career playing for the Detroit Pistons, and in many ways, I feel like a lot of people underrate him as a player. Very impactful when it comes to providing the evidence that smaller guards can lead teams to a championship, which is something that he did not once but twice, and nearly did it 3 years in a row if he did not sustain an ankle injury. Also, he is one of the very few players in NBA history who can make the claim that he beat Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson, arguably all at their peak as well. And personally, when it comes to me, I'm pretty sure many of you all can tell by now, I really don't care about numbers, especially if they do not translate to wins, which is why I applaud Isaiah Thomas even more, because in the early 80s, Isaiah Thomas was averaging great numbers, but changed his game significantly by the late 80s, entering the early 90s, as more of an off guard and gave Joe Dumars a bit more responsibility. Also, by the end of his career, Isaiah Thomas finished as a 12-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA performer, and led the NBA in assists once, as well as being a 2-time champion and final MVP recipient in 1990. Coming in at number 3, we have Stephen Curry, 6'3".
I knew it. I knew it. I swear to God. Who was number 2? Let me think who will be number 2. Let me think. I don't even know. Why is he not number 2? Oh God, Steph. This dude is about to make me mad, bro. My man click on the video, bro. God, I really did click on the video.
down, there really isn't any sports at all. So I decided, why not give you all played is undeniable and is 5-time All-NBA. He has Stephen Curry, 6'3" point guard who has spent all of his career playing for the Golden State Warriors and is still active in the NBA. Pretty sure many of us are aware who Steph Curry is, so just briefly, 6-time All-Star, 6-time All-NBA performer, 3-time NBA.
Let's read it. Let's fucking read it. Rick C. 4,006. 60,000 points. 3rd of all time 3-point. Okay. 6-time. 3 championships, 2
NBA champion, 2-time MVP recipient, and the first ever unanimous MVP in NBA history. But more importantly, Steph Curry's impact on not only the NBA, but just how the game of basketball has been played is undeniable and is quite honestly astonishing how much the game has changed within a small amount of time. The only 2 negatives that I have with Curry in his career is A, defense, and B, the potential lack of longevity, because Curry is already entering his 30s and he only really has 6 to 7 elite level years. Normally players that I have this high up in my rankings, they have a 10-year stretch of elite level play, and I don't really know if we're going to see that with Curry due to his injury prone past. That will also impact where he falls statistically when it's all said and done, but nevertheless, his impact, his greatness is undeniable. Coming in at number 2, we have Jerry West. Yes, I have Jerry West as a point guard, and no, I did not watch Jerry West play. So similar to Oscar Robertson, basing this heavily off of what I've been told and what other people have claimed about him in his career who witnessed him. But when it comes to Jerry West, 6'2" point guard who spent his entire career playing for the Los Angeles Lakers, who put up remarkable numbers, and quite frankly, I think he is grossly underrated when it comes to the type of impact he had as a small guard in an era and in a league that quite frankly was not built for him to succeed in many regards. And not only was he putting up great numbers, but also they did translate to a level of success that routinely positioned him to win a championship and put him in the finals, and eventually won a championship as well as a finals MVP during the year that they actually ended up losing to the Boston Celtics. So there's that. Then when it comes to individual awards, again, they're all there. All-Star appearances, All-NBA selections, and also all defensive teams as well. But very similar to Oscar Robertson, the biggest knock that I have for Jerry West is the area that he played in, and unfortunately, he does not have any control over that whatsoever. But more importantly, the only reason why I have Jerry West over Steph Curry is just because Curry has not played long enough, in my opinion. If he pieces together 8, 9, potentially 10 elite level years, I have no problem at all putting Steph Curry over Jerry West, even if that means he doesn't win another championship. And finally, we have Magic Johnson. Honestly, I don't really think that this is too controversial here. Magic Johnson, 6'9" point guard, just nasty. 6'9"